Hello, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Movie Clubhouse Podcast. The perfect place to be if you love movies and TV. That actually rhymes so extremely well that we'll probably use that words for our new slogan. Yeah, that's basically gonna be our new slogan. The perfect place to be if you love movies and TV. We hope you're all doing great and that you have watched a lot of interesting films or TV shows the last couple of days. If there are any specific show or movie you want to tell us about or discuss with us at the Movie Clubhouse, feel free to reach out to us at our mail that's in the show notes, or maybe at X, previously Twitter, or we are also on Instagram now, so feel free to reach out to us at any of those platforms. But today we have another exciting review outlined for you that is also rhymes so well. We have another review outlined for you, and it's nothing else than PRISCILLA. Yes, A24's latest movie is finally here. We have seen it on the big screen and are ready to review it. So without further ado, let's get straight into today's review. As we said, we have finished watching PRISCILLA from A24 a couple of days ago. The film is directed by Sofia Coppola, written by Sofia Coppola, Sandra Harmon, and Priscilla Presley herself. And as we said, the movie comes from A24, the very famous studio that gives us movies like Midsommar and Are You Afraid of Bo? Is that movie called? Is Bo Afraid? Or Are You Afraid of Bo? Bo is Afraid, is it called? Movies like Bo is Afraid that released maybe a year ago that got a lot of interesting reviews. But today we are talking about PRISCILLA. PRISCILLA is a movie that basically puts up on display Priscilla and Presley's life together, or time together, all the way from when they met in Germany. I think it was Germany, I'm pretty sure. When they met in Germany where Elvis was on duty and Priscilla's father was also on duty, until they started dating, then got married, and until they get their divorce towards the end. So that is basically the story of Priscilla and Elvis's life. But this movie is, for most part, shown from Priscilla's perspective, or her eyes. And that is a really interesting thing to see. It's always been Elvis Presley here and Elvis Presley there, but now it's actually more Priscilla's that in the focus or in the center of the picture. And that is really interesting. We get to see Elvis and Priscilla through the ages, through the 70s and the 60s and maybe the 80s, I'm not really sure. And their life is really interesting. There is a beautiful love story at display. One thing to note, however, is that there is a pretty large age difference between Priscilla and Elvis. I think Elvis is almost 10 years older than Priscilla when they met, or they're always going to be 10 years older, that won't change. But when they meet for the first time, I think Priscilla is around 15 and Elvis is around just about 25 years old. So there is a pretty large age difference between them two, which is pretty interesting to see, but they still manage to get a very exciting life as we get to see in this movie. And as we said, this is more about Priscilla's point of view than it is Elvis. I think Elvis was greatly portrayed by no one else than Jacob Elordi. Jacob Elordi, as you may know from Euphoria, is playing Elvis. Cailee Spaeny is playing Priscilla. And I think both of them did a great performance. Their performances are splendid. Jacob Elordi really feels as Elvis. He really almost nails the Elvis voice to 100%, or the right dialect. It's not perfect, it's not 100%, but I would say it's around 85 to 90% perfect. And Cailee Spaeny as Priscilla, she gives a lot of emotion. She's really phenomenal. So I think both of the actors playing Elvis and Priscilla are doing a stunning job with their respective characters. I would like to say that this story is basically about love, jealousy, and rise to fame or stardom, if you would say it like that. That is the three big parts of this film. You get to see this beautiful love story between Elvis and Priscilla, but also how Elvis's life and business in the Hollywood basically makes Priscilla a little bit alone and a little bit jealous, looking at his co-stars that are many times females. And this is also about Elvis's stardom, but as we said, this is more about Priscilla than Elvis, so we'll try to focus on that. What ended Elvis and Priscilla's relationship was actually not Elvis, as I thought. This may be a spoiler, but I can't say that it's really a spoiler since it has been known since previously and many years back. But it was Priscilla who left Elvis because she was living a life of her own, and so did he. They really didn't, their lives didn't really match up. Priscilla were living a life of her own, and Elvis were out doing all these big rock things, if you would put it like that. So she ended the marriage, actually, as we get to see in the movie also. That may be a small spoiler, but we'll put an auto-spoiler warning for this. I would say that it probably went a little bit too fast towards the end of the film, or the third act of the movie went a little bit fast. They feel like they skipped over some important parts of their life, or just like some scenes were cut, basically. Like when they were having their first child, and a little bit when they were getting married, basically, and on the later parts of their life before they got their divorce. So I feel like it went a little bit too fast in the third act, but that's still fine, because they can't, otherwise this would have been like a 4-hour movie, so they can't show everything, of course. But we also get to see much of Elvis's early life. Which I think is interesting. As I mentioned, he were in Germany on duty, and much of it, he was already famous when we get to meet him first in this movie. But also we get to see his more comeback or rise to stardom. And I think it's really interesting to see on the big screen. We also need to mention that they have a daughter, Elvis and Priscilla, named Lisa Presley. She is not alive, sadly, today, as is not her father. Priscilla is still alive, but Elvis Presley and Lisa Presley has both died at a very young age, which is really sad. Both of them died at a very young age. I overall enjoyed Priscilla a lot. It was interesting to see their life as being displayed on the big screen, and they seem to have had a lot of interesting moments in their life. There is also this love story taking place, which is very grand, but they are also encountering many problems, and it's interesting to see how they solve these problems and how they keep going on, even though the relationship maybe isn't 100% perfect. Most relationships aren't 100% perfect, but it's still interesting to see how they are navigating their relation. This movie had these interesting moments, and there are interesting moments from their lives, but it's still not the most exciting movie I have seen. It's not an action-packed movie, but that's of course fine. But it's not the most exciting film, so blame it for not being an exciting film, but it feels like at moments like there could have been a little bit more power to the story, basically, at some scenes or some moments. But it's really interesting to see Elvis and Priscilla, both of them having a splendid performances by Elordi and Cailee Spaeny. I think also that Elvis's voice was really great in this movie. Even though it's focusing on Priscilla, I think Elvis's voice was pretty much nailed in this whole movie, both when he talked normally and when he was singing. I don't know when he was singing if that was Elordi singing or old recordings of Presley himself, but the voice still looked great nonetheless. I really think this was an authentic story, and I think the writing was it was neutral. It wasn't bad or it wasn't phenomenal. It was just, I think it's based on a book, this movie also. I think the book was called Presley and Me, or Elvis and Me, by Priscilla. And so I think that's really interesting also. But I think overall it's a really authentic story, and we can see a big part of their life put up under the spotlight. And I think the writing is pretty solid. I would say that the ending of the film came on a bit too quickly. As I said, it felt like there are some scenes missing basically in the movie towards the end, but I also know that they can't play this movie for 4 hours basically, even though that would have been interesting to see. And it didn't feel like it was the most complete ending, but that is maybe how it have been in real life, so we can't really throw so much fantasy stuff into that. If it is how it has been for them in real life, then it is what it is, basically. So I would say that I enjoyed seeing the life of Priscilla and Elvis on the big screen, but the movie could have had a little bit more power to it. It wasn't the most exciting film I have seen, and that's still fine. It doesn't have to be really exciting. It was shot in a great way, a really beautiful way, and the story was probably the best part of it. So that is perfect. Nothing wrong with that. But there could have been a little bit more something more powerful to the story, something more exciting to it. That is at least how I feel. So I would probably rate this movie at maybe 3.5 out of 5, maybe 4 out of 5 stars. I think that's a fair rating for this movie. I would say, as I said, the story is probably the biggest pro of this movie. It's a great story, and their love story and their performances are really great. The performances and the story is the biggest pros. The cons are probably the ending of the film and some scenes missing as well. That there isn't that much exciting about this overall story, or at least at moments. If you know Elvis and Priscilla's life since earlier, it probably isn't that much that will excite you about this movie, basically. So that is basically our review for Priscilla by A24, starring Jacob Elordi and directed by Sofia Coppola, but also starring Cailee Spaeny as Priscilla herself. So that was our review for today. If you like this review, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of our newer episodes. We are dropping episodes multiple times a week by now, so you don't want to miss any of that. If you want to, you can also leave a review on this podcast. It helps us a lot. It helps this podcast to rank higher and higher on every list that is possible to rank on, and it makes us so happy. But that was all we have to ask of you. So until we see you guys next time, have a great time watching.